Welcome to Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. In each episode, we invite experts to share their passion and their leadership journey to help you in your next steps. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Now here's the host of Next Steps to Leadership, Dr. Stephen Oliver.
Well, hello to all. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to our podcast, The Next Step to Leadership. As mentioned, I am Stephen Oliver, or affectionately going by Dr. O. And I'm so happy to have all of you in our podcast. And we're going to continue to have additional and other guests to talk about their passion, their expertise, and how this can help you in your next step in leadership. So we're really glad to have you. Now, I am very, very excited to welcome my next guest. This is Allie Dinesen, and it's so good to see you today, Allie. Welcome. How are you? How are you doing?
Thank you. I am absolutely thrilled to be here, Dr. O. It's great to see you again.
Yes, it's really nice to see you. So let me give a little introduction about Allie, and then I want to tell you a fun story on how we met. It was really a serendipitous meeting. But before I do that, let's again introduce our guest. This is Allie Dinesen, and she's a positive psychology expert, and she's on a mission. Her mission is to help individuals and organizations thrive using the science of well-being. She has over a decade experience in the big four accounting firms as a management consultant and currently as an experienced manager. So I'm really excited to break this down and understand what she does. She's working for Ernst & Young, and she coaches consultants along their career path and leads them to focus on promoting organizational and employee well-being. So again, well-being is a theme here. She's also a well-being director of Optimom Nutrition, where she offers one-on-one coaching and programs to help women thrive through pregnancy and parenthood. And lastly, she is one of my annual guest speakers at my class. It's called Emotional Intelligence in the Workplace. It's through the University of Virginia. It's online. It's through the School of Continuing and Professional Services. And so I have a variety of non-traditional students who take this class as part of their curriculum. And it's about emotional intelligence. And it's a pretty great class. It's pretty cool to look at your emotions and look at the emotions of others. And then lastly, Allie lives in the Philadelphia suburbs with her husband, and she has two children and a dog. All right, and the dog is really significant. So, really great background and really nice smile there. Thank you. So, let me tell you all a little bit about how Allie and I met. I mean, this is really fun. So, it was one of those mornings where I had to run to the CVS. I live in the middle of the city of Philadelphia, right downtown. I live next to a park called Sager Park, and it's a really great park. It has a basketball court, tennis court, pickleball now. It has an area for adults to do picnicking. Sometimes there's spring and summer and fall concerts. It's got a big area for kids, and it has a dog park where people take their dogs. Now, Allie and her husband and son lived only about 2 or 3 blocks from me. So on this busy day, I had something to get at CVS. I'm not sure. And I had my head down and I'm walking fast. And then I run by and I see this beautiful little dog or medium-sized dog with some white and brown. And I was like, wow, this is a cute little dog. And so I stopped and I said, hello, doggy. And then I looked up and I saw Allie's wonderful smiling face. And it was her dog that she was walking. She had on her head, I think it was in the late spring, so it was still cold. She had a Penn hat on. Now, Penn stands for the University of Pennsylvania. And so I said, oh, hi, how are you? I said, Penn, are you affiliated in some way with Penn? She said, well, yeah, I went and I got my master's of positive psychology at Penn. And I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. I got my doctorate of education at the University of Pennsylvania, and I teach there part time. And so we have a connection. That's great. And then immediately I thought, positive psychology. I thought, that would be really cool to investigate it because I've heard of that program at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'd love to find out about it. Because I was thinking in my mind, guest speaker, guest speaker. So I asked her, and she briefly shared a little bit about what positive psychology was. And I'm like, yes, if I could get her to guest speak. So I said, please don't be freaked out. Don't be alarmed. Would you like to meet for coffee and talk about um, guest lecturing in my emotional intelligence class? I said, I'm not a weirdo. I mean, I am kind of weird, but I'm not a weirdo. And it's just for coffee and it's just guest speaking. And she was so gracious and lovely and nice. And she said, yeah, sure. I've actually thought about teaching in my own career. So a couple of weeks later, we had coffee. We had this long, really, really cool discussion. And we talked about positive psychology and emotional intelligence and just the state of the working world today and post COVID. Or actually, I think we were still in COVID at that time, and just had this great synergy. And then she agreed, and she now has come several times and guest lectured on positive psychology in my class. The students love it. She does an excellent job. And it's just been a great serendipity. We've had lunch. I've thanked her for lunch, and it's just been a
Mhm.
really good collegial partnership. So all you need to do is say hi to a dog, and you might make a new friend. So I still thank
Never be sorry.
I still thank you so much, Allie, for your graciousness and your willingness to help me out and then learn something new in your life. And after this podcast, I'm going to get you on a date for my summer class because they already asked me to teach it again. So I will ask you again. So that's how we meet.
Wonderful. I cannot wait.
Yeah, that's great. So thank you so much again. So, in our podcast today, we're going to focus on positive psychology. And it's such a fascinating and interesting topic. But first of all, can you just tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are? Just tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are.
Absolutely.
Big
So
question.
it's such a big question. I will try to distill it down. So my role is a full-time experience manager and well-being lead at Ernst & Young. And so Ernst & Young is a Big Four accounting firm. We do a lot of consulting. And in that consulting, what experience managers do is they match the team. We craft the team that goes out to our clients. We usually will pair up the right people with their right skill sets. They try to match their interests and whatnot. Now, that's the traditional role to make sure that we put these teams together, and then we help guide the individual through their tenure at the firm, giving them career advice and whatnot. Now, what I spend a lot of time myself doing is to not only assemble a rockstar team, right, but to ensure that our consultants from day one feel like they matter, to feel like that they belong at our organization, that they are able to identify and play to their strengths. And then I also help them kind of craft those goals that guide not only their day-to-day experience at but their career hopefully beyond. And so those are all of the kind of like rooted in well-being promotion, to feel like you matter, that you belong, that you're included. Now, in addition to this role, I've also crafted this kind of well-being leadership role that is truly kind of more on the nose, bringing positive psychology to my team. And so as a well-being lead, I've had this really awesome opportunity to create workshops on bringing your character strengths to work, how to cultivate a growth mindset, how to celebrate wins. I write a well-being column that is circulated monthly to our international experience management team. And I get to lead our well-being team, which comes up with these well-being promotion initiatives. So things like maybe signing off early on some days, working on how we best communicate with each other to kind of promote positive relationships and also better kind of working manners and working norms. And those that are well received, we end up implementing. But we also pilot initiatives that have been rolled out to my team and also our broader domestic US firm, which is, of course, thousands of individuals. So it's a pretty rad job, I would say,
Mhm.
and one that has been really great for applying positive psychology, but also has been great in shifting our firm's culture from, kind of the clock in, clock out, very traditional work hard mindset to how do we work hard but also protect people's well-being kind of at the same time, and understanding that both are synonymous and both are top priorities for both our people and our organization.
I mean, that you're doing a lot. Wow, I'm impressed. But I mean, several of the things you said, belonging is so important, especially for younger folks who are just coming into an organization. And even those, transferring or going into something new, feeling like they matter, as you said, is really, really critical. So I'm so glad you said that. So I just kind of wanted to rewind a little bit here. So, how did you initially become interested in positive psychology? Um, what motivated you to go this direction? You have a really impressive academic career, credentials, and so a lot of your background is healthcare. But how did you decide to go into this field of positive psychology?
Absolutely. Well, I will tell you that my career has been far from linear. I think in those 10 years, I've kind of bounced around a lot. As you mentioned, in terms of academics, I was very interested in organizational dynamics kind of early on. So I ended up studying organizational sciences when I was an undergraduate at GW in DC. And then I went into the healthcare administration world. I got my master's at Johns Hopkins. And then I dove into management consulting. And so all of this path had me thinking and getting smart up on how do organizations work? How do they click? Kind of how can we improve efficiency? And then I started wondering, okay, but what about the people that make up organizations? Why are they seemingly the last kind of in line when it comes to priorities? And all of this was, I was at this point in management consulting. I was traveling all across the US. I was working some crazy hours, and I was feeling really burned out. And it was around that time where I received this really cool opportunity to lead the senior consulting at my company, and so, or the senior consulting training at my company. And so, what we trained our senior consultants to do was to basically be a consultant. And what that meant was putting them in an immersive, high stress, um, very demanding environment for about 6, 7 days, where they had to basically have a pseudo client case and they had to solve it. And we're talking, we sent them late night emails, we pushed them to do all nighters, we had them crunch. We basically drove our people in the ground and then expected them to sort of learn how to fly. We didn't really teach them things like resilience or growth mindset. And we looked at this firm, and this is widespread across the corporate world. Our average tenure is less than 4 years. So it had me questioning, we're teaching people to be consultants, but we're not teaching them to sort of prioritize their well-being and how important that is. We're teaching them how to work and sort of be functional in high stress environments, but we're not teaching them to sort of bounce back stronger and better. We're not teaching them to channel their strengths that are inherent to them. And so that was kind of the journey that set me into looking into positive psychology. I ended up leaving that firm and finding this new experience manager role. I found this amazing master's program at the University of Pennsylvania, which was founded by Dr. Marty Seligman, who is one of the kind of founding fathers of the field. He still teaches there today. He's absolutely incredible.
Mhm.
If you ever get a chance to see him speak live. But that was the kind of pivot. I just chased something that I truly believed in. And then I ended up having the honestly great fortune and a lot of leadership support to bring the well-being and the positive psychology pieces that I learned into the work that I do every day.
Well, that's a fantastic journey. Yes, Dr. Seligman is renowned. I think he's the author of Learned Optimism, is one of his many books. Um, and what you described, I think, is very traditional of a lot of the big accounting firms and just other firms around the United States, driving people really hard, setting the bar very hard, and, not teaching them some of the psychosocial fields and ways to help manage all that. So that's fantastic that you got into that. So for those people who are watching, listening to our podcast today, and they may not be familiar with the term, can you just tell us a little bit about or give an overview of the field of positive psychology? What makes positive psychology a little different from traditional psychology?
Of course. So positive psychology is kind of known as the science of well-being. It's the scientific study of human flourishing. So what we do in positive psychology is we study the strengths and virtues that enable individuals, communities, organizations to thrive. And so the field itself is grounded in this belief that people want to lead meaningful and fulfilling lives, that we want to cultivate what's best within us. And we also want to experience these positive pieces of the human experience, right? Of love and work and play, joy, awe. Now, this isn't necessarily like a new field. For example, Aristotle used to teach about the good life, also known as eudaimonia, which was kind of authentically living and expressing yourself, your sense of well-being, and having active engagement with life. So positive psychology has very, very long legs. Now, it exists in complement, not in replacement of what we would think of as traditional psychology or clinical psychology.
Right.
So really, positive psychology and the study of things like meaning and fulfillment actually happened back in the Industrial Revolution when we look at trends of psychology and looking at the worker's mind in organizations. Now, after World War II, individuals came back from war and they were dealing with disorder and distress psychologically, right? So all of the psychological resources that we had went to solving that problem. And the benefit for that is that we have treatments for disorder and disease that we just simply wouldn't have without that focus. So that's what's really valuable. Now, this concept of positive psychology is so important because traditional psychology has kind of created this, it exists in this world where if we rid somebody of disease and distress mentally, we kind of put them in a neutral state. Now, positive psychology is saying, okay, so how do we get someone from a neutral state to a flourishing state? How do we help them cultivate positive relationships and find meaning and engagement? How do we kind of create something like that? So that's what positive psychology studies. Clinical psychology looks a little bit more at the negative kind of end of the spectrum, which is extremely valuable and obviously valid. Positive psychology looks at that positive part. So that's kind of why they work on almost a continuum and they work in very much tandem, together for the full human experience.
So great definition, great explanation. Because we're in a world right now that may not be so positive with all the things that are going on. It almost sounds like some of this is related to change too,
Mhm.
putting someone in that neutral state as things are changing. So that's really fascinating. I appreciate you giving that clarification for us so we can have a better understanding. Now, another piece here is happiness, and there
Mhm.
are a gajillion books now on being happy. Everybody wants to be happy. I'm not sure a lot of people are happy, but there are some who are, which is great. So, how does positive psychology connect to happiness? And I think you even have an acronym called PERMA, which is something that's taught in your program. What's that connection to happiness and positive psychology?
Absolutely. So, we can think about positive psychology is not happyology. So it's not the almost intolerance of negative emotions, but rather the focus on how do we cultivate not only happiness, but something that's rooted in it's just deeper. It goes deeper than just the skin level, right? Like if I have an ice cream cone, I'm pretty darn happy. But if it's raining outside and my husband's annoyed at me for God knows what many reasons, I might be a little bit less happy, but I also still may be thriving. So it's important to note that happy tends to be kind of like a subjective, we'll call it fleeting state. Positive psychology focuses on well-being, so this like full emotion of many things that kind of help us live our best lives. Now, there are, as you mentioned, the letters, right? There's this kind of dominating theory within positive psychology called PERMA, and it's an acronym. So it's P is positive emotion, E is engagement, R relationships, M for meaning, and A for achievement. So each of those 5 domains we can think of them as pillars that uphold our state of well-being. So while my positive emotion may be a little bit low, if I have positive relationships and I feel meaning every day and I feel like I'm achieving at work, I am very likely to be thriving. So it's just kind of understanding that those are almost the 5 ingredients that give our lives, the kind of day-to-day well-being that we're hoping to experience, that we're hoping to achieve. And that's where a lot of the research in positive psychology focuses on each of those 5 domains. And I think it's what's really important to kind of to caveat about that is each one sort of blends into the other. We also pursue each one of those domains for its own sake, right? Like
Mhm.
feeling joy or feeling awe is just a wonderful experience, right? We just want it for its own sake. We love to achieve. We're always looking for that promotion, right? Like we're always looking for those next things. We're looking for meaning. We're looking to live lives that, give us kind of some sort of higher calling. So all of them are things that we pursue for our own sake. And they're things that almost interrelate. Now, if you could only focus on one of the 5 pillars, the recommendation would be to focus on relationships.
Mhm.
Dr. Chris Peterson, who was one of the kind of founding fathers with Dr. Marty Seligman, he was from the University of Michigan. He has since unfortunately passed, but he used to summarize positive psychology as other people matter. And
Mhm.
that was it. Of all the research findings they had, he summarized it as that. And what that really means is that at its base level, the thing that will reap you the most reward, the most benefits, will help you live longer, will help you, actually have better, have recovery faster if you're sick, is just having positive connections with people. If you have somebody that you can call at 3 a.m. when you really need to talk to somebody, you're more likely to live longer. So those are the kind of pillars that we have. That's one of the dominating theories, PERMA, in positive psychology. But it's a great thing that somebody could just use right away to apply in their own lives and at work to bolster their well-being.
Well, and this relationships is so powerful. I believe this year the Surgeon General came out with a study on loneliness and how loneliness is almost becoming an epidemic now. And you're right. If we don't have relationships, if we're lonely, that is worse than smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol or overeating or candy or even some narcotics.
Yeah.
Being lonely is a real challenge in our society. I think that's another podcast we could do.
Yeah.
Because we are so connected to all of our devices and computers, and um, it's a real challenge. But yes, that's great to talk about these pillars and positive psychology and how they can all assist in getting us to be happier. I wanted to just pivot a little bit, Allie, and do you mind just sharing a little bit about what you actually do with some of your employees, especially the new employees, to help them with positive psychology and help them with all of this stress? Because um, I've always known that accounting firms work an exorbitant amount of hours and it's
Mhm.
very competitive. So, what are some of the specific things you do to help them in positive psychology?
Absolutely. So the application of positive psychology, it seems so rigorous, but really what you could think of it as is just almost these little culture, like micro moments of just positive culture. So even in your conversations with people, asking how they are authentically, truly, not just asking about where that deliverable is, right? But focusing on kind of them as a human and getting to know them, building that type of relationship that goes beyond just that almost surface level. Having people feel included, mattering like they belong is such a core component, even just from the start, where people need to be able to feel like they can bring their authentic selves to work. Um, you know, in terms of looking at just time practices, we try to be very respectful of people's time. So, in terms of our meetings, very often you'll see that we will schedule 25-minute meetings instead
Hmm.
of 30. And it gives people the kind of ownership of their own time. It also gives them a time to just be mindful a little bit more during the day. It's easy to get down to the crunch and be in the flow with the things that you're working through. But respecting other people's time is a really big one, and also allowing them to kind of take a beat to kind of reel back to what's important to them, to allow them to prioritize. So that just type of respect for somebody is a way that we can, immediately apply something that positive psychology. In my team, we've instituted gratitude practices.
Hmm.
And this is actually pretty common now. It's growing in popularity. We actually do this in my own home, but one of the best ways to kind of cultivate gratitude is as an individual at home, you can kind of journal each day and write down like the good
Hmm.
things that happened. We do this at work, and it's a really great way to give shout outs to people that have done above and beyond work or just done something kind for somebody else. Just acknowledging those little threads helps people to kind of feel more connected, but it also makes them more likely to engage in pro-social behaviors, which is really neat. All of these moments help us kind of boost our well-being, boost the good feelings, boost our relationships. And what we actually start creating is what we call an upward spiral in positive psychology. That's a theory by Dr. Barbara Fredrickson. And what it means is that a lot of these good things, when we're in this positive state, we are more likely to help each other out, to be a better teammate, to actually you're in work more, you take less sick days, you're able to be more creative and open-minded and better problem solver. So all of these things that we can do just kind of at the bare minimum help us kind of become better workers, better individuals, which creates better organizations and better societies. So that's kind of like just a couple of tidbits that we do to easily apply positive psychology in just our day to day.
That's so fantastic. I mean, you're so right. Checking in with employees and spending time, making time for them, and seeing how they're doing. We're not trying to be intrusive, but we want to see how they're doing. I think that goes back to that belonging. And so that's great. I just said in two different leadership programs recently, creating a culture of giving and receiving feedback, and that's part of it too. I heard that in your response is giving people feedback on what they're doing well and helping them out with something they may need to improve on. I think that's so exciting too. Your kids are going to be very um, positively oriented and well-being, and they may not even know it. They will just expect that as they grow up. So that's fantastic. You're really leading by example as a mom.
I like to test out all of the interventions that come out of the research. So we'll see what sticks.
I'm sure you have some fun ones. So, Allie, a lot of in your intro, as I introduced you, talked about well-being. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what is well-being in the workplace today?
Of course. So well-being, I think, takes many forces. If you look at the just kind of overall general pulse of what we're seeing in terms of well-being, Gallup does an amazing, it's kind of like the best practice gold standard workforce report. And this most recent one that came out showed that a lot of our workers, and we're talking over 60%, are extremely stressed, are experiencing anger almost
Hmm.
daily. That's a little bit less than 20%. Um, are finding that their well-being is extremely low. They're finding that they're actively disengaged, right? And that's where we kind of talk about quiet quitting. We also have people that are actively job hunting, so showing some sort of discord for their current workplace. Now, all of this is a really tough. It puts us in a really tough place, right? Because it's not just that I think the workers. It's on the workers, right? And the workers are suffering. What we're finding is that workers are asking for well-being initiatives. They're asking for their employer to support their well-being. So it's not just their individual responsibility anymore. We're seeing a workforce that knows, hey, it's not just on me. I can't just promote my own well-being. I need an environmental approach to help me. And so, interestingly, I just saw the study this week where people who are actively job hunting are now equating salary with well-being. So
Hmm.
meaning that when they go to look, they're looking to see not only, hey, what's the salary here, but is the culture going to support my well-being? And that's a conversation we haven't seen before.
Hmm.
And so that's why I think when you look at ethically or morally, organizations should be poised, right, to help our individuals thrive. And now it's becoming more of a business imperative because our resources are asking for it. But all of this is kind of going to say we're in a state of great opportunity. And now it's up to leadership to say, you know what, we need to kind of come together, have it start flowing from the top down, where we're giving our people the tools to address the clinical side, sure, of psychology and our mental needs and whatnot. But we also need to focus on the key ingredients of helping them be engaged in their work, experiencing daily flow, feeling meaning from the work, understanding the big picture, creating positive teams that kind of have each other's backs, that work in the fluidity of today's environment. And those are the conversations I think are certainly happening. And we're starting to see a lot more traction, not only at, of course, my company, but across the corporate world itself.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It really gives leadership, human resources, and folks like you an opportunity to provide just a wide range of these services to help employees with well-being. I think it also can connect to engagement and motivation, and tenure, keeping people.
Yes.
But Allie, what do you see are some of the challenges in the workforce today? I mean, you alluded to some of that at the beginning of our conversation. What are some of those challenges?
So, I think there's always a resistance to change,
Hmm.
right? Like I think that there's always the people have been set in a certain way of working, right? And I think you see this a lot in consulting where the client needs come first. And that's what I think has made it a little bit difficult, where change always takes time. Cultural change takes time and then additional time. Like it is never something that is a quick switch, right? The employees are starting to ask for these things. Now it needs to come from leadership down, and it kind of has to be in lockstep. The problem is, I think a lot of times with these challenges in addressing these kind of well-being initiatives, is that you need to find what works, right? You need to find what kind of suits your way of working. It's not one size fits all. Everybody needs something different. It's also finding that these well-being initiatives need to be almost equitably dispersed, right? So we're not just giving all of the benefits to parents because they have a life outside of work, right? We're looking at every single person is worthy of being given these well-being initiatives or having these benefits. And of course, now we also have to have acknowledge the fact that has to be a business case that's made, because we're in the corporate world, right? So like if it doesn't impact the bottom line in a positive way, then we're probably not going to entertain it. And I think that's what now we're seeing in the research, and also what we're looking to aim for in the corporate world as well.
And so that leads into the next question. Can you tell us a little bit more about the business case for positive psychology to organizations, and, talking with leaders, teaching and guiding them into fostering well-being?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of times in this corporate realm, right? Like we need to speak business to business people. And so when you think about it, just at the global perspective, Gallup came out with this statistic, which I found absolutely staggering. And it was low engagement, which is kind of like the people who log in and they don't really know what their job is, but they're paid and they're not really that proactive and they're not really building, the team relationships. That type of low engagement, it costs the global economy almost $9 trillion. So that's about 9% of the global GDP. That's staggering. That's like a huge number that we can't even quite fathom, right? But when you think about at the individual level, you know what it feels like subjectively when you're thriving. And interestingly, when we look at the science, it tells us that flourishing people and organizations make a really compelling business case. And so for the individual, what we see is they're healthier, they're happier, they're more empowered. Okay, health and happiness, that ties into lower healthcare costs, right? They're more creative, they're more productive. That's great for any sort of deliverable that you may have, client or internal, right? They're more likely to stay at their employer. So less training costs, less recruitment costs. You're seeing individuals who are less depressed, less anxious. You're seeing people that recover from disease faster. They're also less likely to experience severe illness. So that's a concrete case kind of at the individual level. You look at the organizations and you find that business units that have actively engaged workers have approximately like a 23% higher profit compared with business units where their employees are usually characterized as miserable or kind of are not they're kind of the opposite of thriving, right? They're languishing. The workforce is resilient against layoffs, and in this day and age, we're seeing talent layoffs kind of just time and time again. The industry's been really tough. These companies bounce back. faster because they have people who engage in pro-social behaviors. They have faith in their company and its higher mission. They trust, right? It's not broken. It's not brittle once they see those layoffs. They have an organization that achieves excellence over consistency. They have significantly lower absenteeism. They have less turnover and accidents. And they're also more likely to see customer loyalty. So in a client serving world, that's huge, right? So the benefits, the business case is qualitative and quantitative. It's kind of the both in two. Now it's just up to the businesses to find a way to implement a lot of these well-being initiatives and then measure. And I think that's what's so exciting about this work in this field is that's where we're at the cusp. We're starting to see these large organizations with huge populations that are dipping their toe into this. And I think we'll see some really promising results.
And that's fantastic, really relating to the clients and customers and connecting to the mission statement. I think those are two really, and of course, all the statistics you gave are very powerful in boosting organization of well-being and using positive psychology. So, again, for our viewers and our listeners, what might be just some small steps that they can take for themselves or for their teams or new hires or those who've been around for a long time? They're challenging too. What are some small little things they can do to boost well-being?
Absolutely. So I think just for starters, right, if you think about the PERMA model and you're thinking, okay, positive emotions, engagement, meaning, achievement, relationships, you can almost kind of take a self-check and think, okay, so what can I boost today? Whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whatever it may be, that's kind of just a good, quick gut check for you to say, all right, so then what should I do as a result, right? A couple quick things. You could learn about your own strengths, learn about the things that you're really good at, find ways that you can apply them. And there's a positive psychology intervention where you're challenged to apply your strengths in a new way every day. So that gives you a little bit of challenge, but it also gives you a sense of kind of leveraging your own creativity to kind of to just be kind of more authentically yourself every day at work and to exercise those muscles. You could do mindfulness and meditation. Now, I know at our firm, we actually have a daily mindfulness call across the firm where you can tune in and attend a mindfulness session. The benefits of mindfulness are extremely high, including, enhancing focus and reducing stress. And that's certainly something that you can do, even if it's 2 minutes breathing at the beginning of a meeting. We do that for a very, traditional corporate firm. We do that at the beginning of some of our meetings. Of course, you mentioned positive feedback and recognition, which is so important. I think another one is social connections, right? Like we talked about how important relationships are. One of the, interestingly enough, positive psychology has shown us of all the things that you can do to boost your positive affect in your relationships and whatnot. A random act of kindness is the single most powerful thing that you can do to kind of boost your well-being in a day. So buy the person behind you in line, a cup of coffee, or take something off one of your coworkers' plates. Like those little micro moments really do add up and benefit both you, any other individual around you, right? But also the organization as a whole, for sure.
Yes, and you used in my class the VIA character strengths quiz, and it just allows students or anyone just to see their strengths and really focus on strengths. So that's great. I'll give a shameless little plug here. Study emotional intelligence. Look at yourself and your self-awareness and how you regulate yourself, and then empathy and having connections and concern for others. So that's great. So a couple more questions. This has just been a really great conversation. What are some ways that some of our listeners can learn more about positive psychology and the science of well-being?
Absolutely. So, positive psychology is out there. I mean, you can do a quick Google search and check Google Scholar. You can see the most recent of the kind of literature that's out there. For those of you that are kind of more lay people and you just want to read the parts that have already been refined with all the scientific pieces out of it, right? You can look at Coursera has a fantastic kind of positive psychology 101 course. Actually, a lot of the instructors on the Coursera platform are from the University of Pennsylvania, which is really cool. And they are truly just the best of the best, and they're phenomenal. And it's just a very interesting kind of go at your own pace type of listening. There are certificate programs out there. Of course, there are master's programs that are out there. And if you're a reader like me and you just want to dip your toe into this and maybe just learn about the field, there are 3 books that I typically recommend that are pretty foundational and just a really great and easy starting place. One is Authentic Happiness by Dr. Marty Seligman.
Yes.
And that's, of course, he founded the field, and he talks about PERMA and what happiness sort of means, and really gives kind of a beautiful layout of the field and its major concepts. And a lot of his research is very just digestible, and he tells it beautifully. The second one is Flow, which is, I think the full title is Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience, which is by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Flow being actually that part of the E in PERMA, engagement. And that is immediately applicable to work. It's that feeling when you really dive into something and you feel like you're authentically connecting and using your best strengths every day. That's a fantastic book. Also a kind of an easy read. And then the third is The How of Happiness by Sonia Lubomirsky, who she is just a fantastic writer. She's a very prominent positive psychology researcher. She talks about the science of happiness as well. And she, what I particularly love is includes very practical strategies for individuals to increase their well-being. So all 3 of those are a great way to dip your toes in. I get no kickbacks from any of them. So they truly are just my favorite reads and a great starting place for those of you who may be interested.
So great. Thank you so much for those resources. Really appreciate them. So in closing, do you have any advice for others in their career planning, whether they're brand new in their career, whether they're mid-level, or maybe they're kind of coming to a wind down in their career and maybe want to do something different?
Absolutely. So, I think the one thing that if I could look back through my extremely nonlinear career, up until this point, I think the one thing I would suggest is kind of finding that thing that gives you a spark, whether it's, looking at somebody that has a certain job that you think is really interesting, or you find a certain spark when you're talking to somebody and you think, oh, I really like that characteristic of theirs, or I really admire this about them. Setting aside time kind of regularly in your career to almost take a pulse check with yourself to say, what is resonating with me as a person? When do I feel most alive at work? All of those things, I think we get so caught up, especially in the US, in the stream of achieving and when that next promotion will be. And we often kind of deviate from what is inherent to our authentic selves and what we would kind of our best self would do versus what society almost tells us we should do. So that's my advice is follow those things that give you a spark. Use those as clues as you go through your career, or if you're pivoting, to look for that thing that kind of ignites your flame. And if you ever find yourself at a crossroads, one of our great positive psychology interventions is to always ask yourself when you're facing a decision point, you're not really sure which way to go, is what would my best self do? And I think that's applicable to your career. I think it's applicable to your day-to-day life as you kind of go about it. But that's the thing that I wish I had learned right off the bat. I'd say I learned it a little bit. I certainly can't say late in the game, but it helped me craft a career that I will say has changed working in a job to become working in much more of my calling. And I think you'll know what that is as well, but that would be my advice.
Great advice. I apologize. You may have heard a helicopter go over. So I live right near a hospital, and that was the life flight. So I apologize. But that was sound advice as far as igniting your flame. What sparks you. And I just think that's great, and again, looking internally and just knowing yourself and what feels right. So very sound advice. Well, Allie Dinesen, positive psychology expert, and your mission to help individuals and organizations thrive using the science of well-being. Great introduction. I can't thank you enough for your time, your expertise, and coming to our podcast today. I really, really appreciate it. So
Thank
great
you
to
so
have
much.
you.
Thank
Yes,
you for having me. This has been wonderful.
yes, it's great. This has been fun. And in closing for everyone, um, thank you again for coming to our podcast and listening to positive psychology and well-being. And if you would like any assistance with positive psychology and well-being for your own career as you take the next step, please feel free to reach out to us at HRC Vision Leadership and Management Consulting, and Allie and I can give you a hand in what you're seeking. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming.
You've been tuning into Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.